Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Africa Current. In today's episode, we'll be talking about something that is not frequently talked about in the African household or even within the African community, and that is mental health. To help us in this conversation, I have invited my friend Dr. Abi Wacheria here with us. Abby and I met about 8, 9 years ago when we were both graduate students at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. She holds a PhD in counseling psychology. Abby, welcome to the Carrefour. To begin our conversation today, why not you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your journey so far?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Abby Modoni Washira. You can just call me Abby. I am a counseling psychologist and I currently work at University Counseling Center in Richmond, Virginia. I'm also originally from Kenya. I was born in Kenya and I moved to the US in 2004. And since coming to the US, I've lived in different states here in the US, specifically North Carolina, Nebraska, which is actually where I did my graduate studies, both my master's and my PhD.
Go Big Red.
Yes, go Big Red, exactly. Whew, Nebraska brings a lot of memories. And after Nebraska, I did my residency, which is also called a psychology internship in Atlanta, Georgia. I did that in Emory University.
You came here and you decided to study psychology. I
Mm-hmm.
know we are Africans. Many times when
Mm-hmm.
we come to school in America, the idea is that, oh, let's go to engineering, let's go to medicine,
Mm-hmm.
law, what have you. I mean, those are the things that our parents sort of push. Like, why did you choose to do psychology? And, was it something that you've always wanted to do? I mean, how did that really interest you to start to do?
Okay, that's a great question. So I actually was, the typical African child who wanted to go into the medical field. I wanted
Hmm.
to be a doctor. And specifically, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And the reason why is because growing up, I actually had a strong fascination with the brain. I would watch things on TV and I would see how like different neurons in the brain would fire. And I just used to find that to be so fascinating. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but specifically I wanted to be a neurosurgeon just so that I can work more with the brain and understand it more. I also
Hmm.
used to get really fascinated when I would hear like neuroscientists or neurosurgeons saying how like there's so much they don't know about the brain. And I was just like, that is so fascinating. Like this thing that we have inside of us, and like we don't even know all the things that we should know about it. So I just found that
Yeah.
to be so fascinating. But now what happened is when I came to the States, I realized that I was not only fascinated with the brain, I was also fascinated with mental health issues in general. Specifically, I was interested in how mental health intersects with social and cultural issues. So things like immigration experiences, moving from one location to another, how it affects the family. I was interested in family dynamics, how your upbringing influences who you end up becoming, or some certain behaviors you might have or certain worldview that you might have. I was
Hmm.
interested in cultural issues, so based on your race, based on your religion, based on your ethnicity, your nationality, all these different aspects of you, your age, your gender, how does that influence, some of the experiences that you have? And then also, how does that intersect with mental health, or your well being? So, those are some of the things that I found to be fascinating when I now came to the States and, I was a little bit older. So, still a fascination with the brain, but more so mental health. And how does that intersect with social and cultural issues and environmental issues as well? Another thing is I also realized as I was growing up, a lot of people around me used to confide in me. So people would tell me how, I was someone who they felt comfortable talking to, and they also told me how like when they talked to me, they would feel heard, they would feel comfortable, they would feel like I was someone safe that they could talk to, and they would say how like I just knew exactly what to say to make them feel good.
Yeah.
And so, as I continued on, I mean, I studied psychology, and actually that's around the time when people used to tell me that. Even my first job, I worked as a customer service representative for Papa John's Pizza. And I just used to take orders and like talk to customers and things like that. And I used to get really good feedback about how personable I was, how I was able to handle conflicts well. So anytime there was a conflict with like a customer, I used to be the one who would be called to go handle that, just because I knew how to problem solve. I was just
Yeah.
a very easy person to talk to. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I would get information like that from different people, including the work that I was doing, I realized, what? I don't think I want to go necessarily into being a neurosurgeon. I think I want to go into something that allows me to, talk one on one with people and really help people develop. And I felt like counseling psychology was the thing that would help me with that, what would lead me to doing that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So thanks for sharing that. And one thing that I really like about, I guess, your story is this, transition really, truly, like we do in academia. We go
Hmm.
in with an open mind that I want to be able to understand something. And if I go to school to learn and all of a sudden I find that I've developed a new set of interests, then I'm just going to pursue that. It wasn't
Hmm.
so much that I am stuck on this is what I have to do.
Hmm.
So, you found that passion and you decided
Hmm.
to pursue it, but you talked about, mental health, intersection with culture and social issues.
Hmm.
But coming from an African background,
Hmm.
mental health and all of that stuff really is something that is not talked about. It is
Hmm.
something that, I don't know, it's just not talked about. So how
Yes.
did you reconcile, this part of your cultural heritage
Hmm.
with, trying to do something, and likely maybe you're going to go back to your community to try to see how you can help them. How do you try to reconcile that we are from a culture and a community that these are not
Hmm.
things that are really promoted or, pushed, but,
Hmm.
they're not really at the forefront of conversation. It's just,
Hmm.
figure out life, so to speak.
Yes. It's tough, definitely. There is a big stigma, in the African community when it comes to talking about mental health or mental health concerns in general.
Hmm.
And I think there's so many reasons for that. And one of the reasons is there are misconceptions about what it means to seek professional mental health. A lot of people, they know of someone, or maybe they've just heard or seen on TV that, if you're going to seek professional help for your mental health, that
Hmm.
means you're crazy. That means you've
Yeah.
lost it. So usually that's one of the biggest misconceptions. So people are like, well, I'm not crazy. I haven't lost my mind. So why
Hmm.
should I be going to see a therapist? I'm fine. I can handle it. Then there's also some of the cultural ideals that we have as Africans. So one of the things that I know from my community and also working with clients who are Africans is they tell me how they get these messages from their family and relatives about how they always need to push through at all
Yeah.
costs. You're not allowed to give up. You're not allowed
Hmm.
to say you're struggling. So also those messages that we get, like, we're not supposed to admit when we're struggling. We just need to push through and keep going. And, our parents have made sacrifices. So we also need to make sacrifices to get to where we want to be or to advance and succeed.
Hmm.
So we just also like kind of also don't help ourselves whenever we hold so strongly to such ideals, or
Yeah.
such a way of thinking. So that's another thing. I think another thing is, some people might be open, to seek therapy. They realize, what, I know someone who has done therapy before. They said it was helpful. Maybe I should try this thing.
Hmm.
But then they realize, I'm not really ready. Like, I want to do it, but I don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I'm ready to start working on this issue. Or they realize if they go to therapy, that means they're going to have to address some underlying things that they're not ready to address, some things that maybe happened to them in the past that they don't feel like they're ready to unpack.
Hmm.
So usually that's another reason. So there's a little bit of openness, but then there's a fear. Like, am I, is this, am I ready to do this? Like, am I ready to face these things that I haven't faced all these years? And then there's also the issue of trust, and
Yeah.
that's a big one. If I talk to this therapist about these things that have happened to me or I'm going through, you know are they able to keep that information confidential? And
Yeah.
therapists are, supposed to keep information confidential. It's just that people may not know that that's the case, so they don't really know what happens in the therapy room and things like that. And so they might have some fears that really could be addressed if they just went and talked to a therapist and learned what therapy is about. But usually, those are some of the things. Another thing that I want to add is there are clients who have sought therapy, but then they don't have a good experience with their therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So, the client and the therapist, they're not a good fit. And that is for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest reasons, though, is cultural differences, cultural worldview differences. So, you're working with a therapist who doesn't understand what it's like to be African, who doesn't understand what it's like to move from a country in Africa. They probably don't even know the country that you come from in Africa.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
they might lack a lot of understanding about where you come from, who you are, what it's like for you to immigrate to this country. They might not even know much about, like, maybe some of the challenges that come with your visa. Let's say you're an international student.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't really understand, like, with the type of visa, some of the restrictions that come with that, or some of the challenges that come with that, they can't fully understand, like, how to support you and help you if they don't know these things, or maybe they're not even trying to educate themselves on these things. So that now leads to them having a negative experience in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
where they're sharing about what's going on for them, but then they're realizing there's a gap, like they're not able to connect with their therapist because the therapist doesn't really understand or is not aware of their experience as an African, as an immigrant, as an international student, and all these things.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of different reasons, but those are the some of the ones that are the most common.
I see. So, I mean, you said a lot of things here, and we're going to pick on each and every one of them, separately. But I want to start from this beginning part about, people thinking that you're crazy or maybe you're sick, or
Mhm.
and maybe pair that with the fact that trust issues. Maybe it's the issue
Mhm.
of, I don't know, I don't want to open up to a stranger. I'm just
Mhm.
scared. And the fact that there's probably not a lot of, I don't know, Black Africans like me that are doing
Yeah.
this job. And so
Mhm.
all this stigma, like, how did, maybe the question really is that, where did all of this originate from? I mean, is it based
Mhm.
on, is there something inherent that was part of our culture that made
Mm.
us maybe develop this sort of idea? Because
Mm.
maybe I don't want to be looked upon as crazy. Maybe there's
Mhm.
something as part of my culture, part of my upbringing, that's going to look
Mhm.
bad on me if people find out.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's that even if there is somebody from my
Mhm.
culture that is
Mhm.
a counselor that I can go talk to, maybe I'm
Mhm.
afraid that I'm going to run into that person in the community meeting. For
Mhm.
example, we're in Lincoln. It's a small place.
Mhm.
Um, give it a year or two, pretty much you might encounter all the Africans you need to encounter in the city. So
Yes.
maybe, I mean, are those part of those? Like, I'm trying to really understand
Mhm.
what really is the root cause of some of this stigma. Is it something
Mhm.
that was, in that we took upon ourselves based on how society decided to define us, or
Mhm.
was it something that is just inherent as part of our culture?
Mhm. I think it's both. And the reason I say that is because I can't say that it's one reason, just because you know different people have different backgrounds and different
Hmm.
experiences. So what is underlying for one person might not be the same for another person.
Yeah.
So for some people, the trust issues could come from, maybe they experience trauma growing up. And so one thing that happens when you experience trauma is you have a hard time building trusting relationships with people.
Hmm.
Like, you can, it's just that it might take time, or there's certain conditions that need to be met in order to fully trust. So
Yeah.
that also influences your relationship with your therapist. You're not going to be able to trust a therapist that easily. So for one person it could be traumatic experiences. For another person it could be messages that they used to get from their family, from relatives, from media, about mental health concerns. If
Hmm.
all they were hearing is, by you being depressed or you being anxious or something like that, like you're crazy, then of course they wouldn't want to admit that they're having those concerns if they're starting to see that they have symptoms.
Yeah.
Because then they don't want to be labeled as crazy, they don't want to be labeled as not fit to do certain things. maybe they
Mhm.
also don't want to be ridiculed because maybe they come or they have a family members or they have relatives or people around them who ridicule, people who might have certain mental health conditions. The other thing is, maybe people might be coming from backgrounds where um, family members have a limited understanding about different mental health concerns. Like ADHD is one of the ones that I've heard in my community. Like, some people actually think it's a disorder that's made up,
Mhm.
that, oh, when a child is hyperactive or they're not able to sit still or pay attention, it's conduct issue, you know, or it's a behavior issue, but for some, yes, it is. But then for other children, it's actually a mental health concern that they actually need to get treatment for.
Mhm.
So then if you're coming from a family that doesn't really believe that you might actually have this mental health condition and you need treatment so that you can function well, then you don't get the help that you need, or you feel like you also start to feel like you're making it up. Maybe there's
Yeah.
really nothing wrong with you, or you might start to feel a lot of shame, like, okay, I know there's something wrong, but, I just have to figure out how to fix this because no one else will help me fix it. You know,
Yeah.
I need to get over this.
Yeah.
So for some people, it's that. Then we also have to think about the fact that, as Africans, we come from a continent where a lot of things have happened to us here historically, right?
Mhm.
A lot of different countries in Africa have experienced colonialism,
Mhm.
and colonizers came to our different countries, um, you know, under a guise, right? They
Yes,
didn't
that's
come
true.
saying they want to conquer, they,
Mhm.
they came, with this approach of they want to help, they want to work with the communities and things like that. And then they turned on us, you
Mhm.
know. So also thinking historically, I think also trust issues may have come from that. So, and I guess I'm saying this to say that there are a lot of people, Africans and also African Americans here in the United States, who, because of the experiences that they've had with like colonizers or like, people who have enslaved them,
Mhm.
then they are like, we can't trust the system,
Yeah.
because they associate the system or like professional mental health system
Yeah.
with the people who have oppressed them,
Mhm.
so there's also that to think about.
Okay, so maybe let's talk a little bit about this, I guess, trauma we can call it, right? Slavery, colonialism. I mean, Desmond Tutu famously said that, the folks showed up, we had the land, they had the Bible. They said, let's pray. We close our eyes. By the time we open it, we had the Bible, they had our land. And so that in itself, and again, you're right. Maybe because some of us are just second generation removed from this colonial stuff. Our parents, our grandparents witness those. We hear these stories firsthand. Not we're not 10 generations removed. And then we come to America. There's the flip side of it. You have slavery. I mean, I remember driving through Alabama and stuff. The things I saw there, I was like scared. And so then there's also the trust in the healthcare system in this country where, I don't know, a lot of black folks have no trust in the healthcare system. So we see that there are all these traumatic events that have happened, I guess to a lot of black people or African folks in this country. Um, so you saying, I mean, these events somehow, are they part of the cause for the stigma? And, how can we maybe as a community, how can we, I mean, I don't know, can we overcome this? Or what is it that folks like you who are African and in this sort of profession, what are some of the things that you can do to be able to help us so that we can start to work through some of these, this trauma that we've literally lived through all our lives?
Hmm. Yes. Well, man, that's a heavy question. I don't even know where to start with
We can
with
start
answering
anywhere.
it,
Yeah.
But my thinking is this, because it's taken so many years,
Hmm.
we've gone through so much and so much, like so many years.
Yeah.
It's also gonna take time, for us to heal,
Yeah.
you know. And I think part of that healing involves acknowledging what has happened, in your current lifetime, the experiences you've had, things you've gone through. But at the
Yeah.
same time, when you're working with a therapist, to be able to address these other things that are historical, because I think intergenerational trauma is real. even
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't live in a certain time period, just knowing that your people went through something,
Mm-hmm.
something very traumatic, that's something that you carry. Your parents carry that. They, when they talk about stories of their lives, or when they talk about like their grandparents and or your grandparents and what they went through, like these are still things that we hear, and they do affect us whether we know it or not. So
Mm-hmm.
I think not only addressing what has happened for you in your lifetime, I think also addressing historically what has happened to your people is something that can help with getting on a path of healing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is we need more representation in this profession. Representation in terms of we need more Black psychologists, we need more Black therapists, we need more like African, Black African,
Mm-hmm.
therapists or Black
Yeah.
African psychologists. Because I can't tell you how many times, like when I work with a client who identifies as Black or who identifies as African, how they feel so. They talk about how they feel so seen, and they feel like I understand just because of the identities that I have, the shared identities that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and for them it's the first time that they've probably ever worked with someone who shares in those identities, and they talk about what a difference is made for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me that I think we need more people in this profession who have these identities, who are Black, who are African, because we don't have many of these people. And another thing is, even for us as clinicians, so I recognize that in my profession, in my workplace, there's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who look like me or come from where I come from.
Yeah.
And so the conversations are very different, and a lot of times I end up being maybe uh the only person who voices a concern, related to Black issues or African issues or ethnic minority issues, because I'm aware but they're not,
Yeah.
or they might have a limited understanding, or they might feel shy, to bring those things up because they don't have those identities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that happens. I think when there's more representation in this profession and also in the workplace, then like more of our voice gets represented in these settings so that we can advocate better for these clients.
Yeah. So you said something that I really like, and that was acknowledging. Because many
Yeah.
times I feel in society, we talk a lot about time healing stuff, and we're just hoping that maybe we're all going to die and, forget. But really, acknowledgement of what has happened. And you're right. Sometimes maybe I don't need to live there to my parents just telling me that story. Just emotes this trauma. I mean, I realized that when my grandma told me some stories about the wars that my great grandfather fought in, I mean, it brought some feelings that I never thought I would have. I mean, I never knew the man, I never seen him before, but out of nowhere, I don't know, it's rage, some kind of rage that came in me. And I was, shocked about that. But on the flip side, when you talk about representation, a lot of us having to go into these professions, a lot of us are sometimes the first people in our family, the first, maybe in our entire even race to get into some of these rooms and, be there and advocate. Sometimes that can also become very, very exhausting because
Yes.
you find yourself, you become that one person or that one woman or man that constantly have to remind people. I mean, so does all the burden have to be on us, the minority, or here in America, in the context we're in, does the majority white population have to bear some of this burden? And they themselves try to reach out, they themselves try to do some of the acknowledging, and also try to see that, we can, go through this healing or grieving and healing process so that, we help a segment of the population. I mean, do
Yes.
they, bear some of that responsibility?
Yes, the answer is yes. I think we all need to work together, because what happened in the past involved all of us. It wasn't
Yeah.
just Black people didn't oppress themselves. You know what I mean? So I think everyone who has been involved, obviously, like these are folks who are living right now. These are not folks who are slave masters and things like that, but their
Yeah.
ancestors maybe were,
Yeah.
and that's something to acknowledge too. So I think even for them, it's important for them to acknowledge their role in the trauma that a lot of Black people have experienced, Black African people have experienced, and acknowledge that alongside the struggles that Blacks and Africans are going through,
Hmm.
and be willing to talk about these things, and not to put Black people or African people in positions where they are the only ones who are bringing up concerns that they have, things that, need to be brought up, like their voice, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I do feel like that's one thing that I would like to see. And that's something that I've actually mentioned, even in my work setting, how like I don't want to be the only person who, anytime there's an issue related to Africans or related to Black people or related to immigrants or related to international students, like I am the one who tends to be the first one to say it. Sometimes I want to just sit back and hear somebody else say it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, you get it. Like, okay,
Exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, you get it. You see it. I'm not the only one who sees it because of my background.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels so good to see someone who doesn't look like you to be able to acknowledge these things too. It helps us feel, like you're, I don't know, it just builds, it brings this sense of camaraderie,
Yeah.
even if we don't share in the same identities. It just feels so good. So I
Yeah.
feel like that support from people who don't come from our communities, it makes a big difference, and I think they do need to be a part of this conversation. And in fact, I encourage that, because I think for true healing to happen, that needs to happen. So it needs to happen within our own community, supporting each other and acknowledging it for ourselves, but at the same time being open to including you know people from different backgrounds to be a part
Mm-hmm.
of that conversation, and us working together to get to that place of healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I hope that, we can get there. And I am especially grateful that in the times we live in now, there is renewed interest in mental health. I mean, we just went through May, a whole mental health month, creating all this awareness. There's a day, I think, coming up in October as well. All of these, creating all this awareness. But maybe if we flip on the other side, we look at from within our own community, we have this black tax, right? Where because I'm the first in my family to have succeeded, it just becomes that now I have to take care of hundreds of people. And, we Africans, I mean, I'll speak from my West African perspective, we have like hundreds of kids. And, so now it's like I have the responsibility of an entire village, so how can we as a community be better at this? Because I think that in itself creates some kind of stress, trauma, and folks come here and even their own self they're not able to take care of, because guess what? If I take a break for just a day, my entire village will starve. I have to take care of, if I have my own family, I have my family, I have maybe 50 other people that depend on me supporting them somehow. And so, what can we as a community?
That's a very good question, because I agree. Like, I liked what you said about how, like, if you don't help, then there are people from your village who could starve. Like, that's a real issue. And of course, you don't want that, because these are people that you love and care about. And I'm sure they've supported you to get as far as you've gotten.
Mhm,
So I want to acknowledge that, but also say that one of the mistakes that I feel like some of us make when we come to this country is when we give back. Like, it's good to give back, yes, but also you need to think about, by you giving back, is it helping develop the potential that the people you're giving to
mhm.
have. So you're not just giving and they're using and it's going away. Like, you have to give in the sense that you give, and then they somehow, like, use that to help themselves now be self-sufficient. All right. So I think it's good to give back. It's good to help people from your village, from your community. But one thing that we need to think about is, by giving back, by helping them, are we enabling them to continue depending on us? Or are we helping them with the goal of the little that we give or the much that we give? Is it helping them develop themselves so that they don't have to continue depending on you forever? Because you can't be able to help, people from back home for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah.
you also have to help them develop themselves. So I think that's where a lot of us go wrong too, when we come here, where we feel this guilt, like we have to keep giving money, we have to keep helping. I think it's good to help, but at the same time I think we need to be wise in the way that we help too. Like, can
Mhm.
we help in such a way that helps develop someone's potential so that they can help themselves, but at the same time they can continue to help people who are in the community we've left behind.
Yeah.
that the burden doesn't just fall on you.
I hope you've been enjoying the conversation so far. I think that this would be a good place for us to pause, and we will pick up this conversation in next week's episode. Until next time, thank you for joining us at the Carrefour.